Arthur Finch was a creature of habit and quiet dedication, a human cog in the sprawling, often indifferent machinery of Washington, D.C. His office, a cramped cube nestled deep within the Department of Commerce, was his sanctuary. His daily ritual involved coffee, a meticulous review of system logs, and tending to the Meridian Nexus, a legacy system of obscure but immense importance. The Nexus, a complex web of algorithms and aged hardware, quietly facilitated the real-time processing of global trade tariffs and agreements, a silent backbone to the world's economy. Few understood its intricacies, fewer still cared, but Arthur, with his spectacles perched on his nose, knew every hum and whir. He was the Meridian Nexus's sole caretaker, its vigilant guardian against digital decay, his existence as unassuming as the system itself. Then came the shutdown. Washington, D.C., a city usually abuzz with purposeful energy, fell into an eerie quiet. Desks emptied, lights dimmed, and the grand halls of government grew desolate. For most, it meant an unexpected, unwelcome vacation. For Arthur, it was a slow-motion catastrophe. The Meridian Nexus, designed decades ago, required constant, hands-on maintenance, firmware updates, hardware checks, and manual data synchronization that couldn't be automated. The lack of staff, the frozen budgets, and the sudden unavailability of even basic supplies like thermal paste for overheating processors meant the Nexus was on borrowed time. Arthur felt a cold dread creep into his chest, a premonition of the silent, systemic collapse only he could foresee. Arthur tried to raise the alarm. He called his supervisor, then his supervisor's supervisor, leaving increasingly urgent voicemails that vanished into the void of automated replies. He emailed, detailing the Meridian Nexus's critical vulnerabilities and the escalating risks. Each attempt was met with silence or a curt, "Due to the government shutdown, all non-essential personnel and operations are suspended." The irony was a bitter taste in his mouth. The very mechanism meant to ensure global stability was deemed non-essential by a bureaucracy paralyzed by its own internal conflicts. The world, unknowingly, was sleepwalking towards an economic precipice, and Arthur, the only one awake, found himself powerless, his voice lost in the echoing emptiness of the shutdown. The first signs of trouble were subtle, almost imperceptible to an untrained eye. A fractional delay in a tariff update for a major Asian market, a minor discrepancy in a shipping manifest for European goods. But Arthur saw them, flashing red on his personal terminal at home, a ghost in the machine he could still remotely monitor. The Meridian Nexus was faltering. Its aging components, starved of their usual meticulous care, were beginning to creak under the strain. He knew the cascading effects. Delays would become errors, errors would become data corruption, and data corruption on the scale would halt global trade, triggering an economic panic unlike anything seen before. The clock was ticking, and with each passing hour, the silent gear was grinding closer to a catastrophic halt. Arthur knew he couldn't wait. The system's integrity was degrading faster than he'd anticipated. He had to get back into his office, to the server racks, to the heart of the Meridian Nexus. But the Department of Commerce building was locked down, secured by skeleton crews and strict protocols. He tried his ID badge. It was deactivated. He tried calling security. No answer. The only way in was through a side entrance, an old service tunnel rarely used, known only to a handful of long-tenured staff. It was a long shot, a desperate, almost illegal maneuver, but the alternative was unthinkable. The fate of the global economy hinged on his ability to bypass a locked door and a sleeping bureaucracy. Navigating the deserted corridors, Arthur felt like a trespasser in his own workplace. He eventually found the service tunnel, a dusty, forgotten passage that led to a rarely used loading dock. As he emerged, a lone figure stood silhouetted against the dim emergency lights. Marcus, a night security guard Arthur only vaguely recognized. Marcus, initially suspicious, listened patiently as Arthur, uncharacteristically impassioned, explained the impending disaster. He laid out the technical details, the economic ramifications, the sheer, silent horror of what was unfolding. Marcus, a man who saw the world in simple terms of right and wrong, of duty and neglect, slowly nodded. "Show me," Marcus said, gesturing towards Arthur's office. "What needs to be done?" With Marcus's reluctant help, Arthur gained access to his office, the air thick with the stale scent of disuse. The terminal screen glowed ominously, red alerts now screaming across the Meridian Nexus's diagnostic interface. Critical systems were failing, data streams were fragmenting, and the global trade network was moments from a complete freeze. Arthur's hands flew across the keyboard, a blur of practiced motion. He replaced failing memory modules, applied thermal paste to overheating processors, and began the intricate process of manually resynchronizing critical data arrays. Sweat beaded on his brow as he worked, the rhythmic click of keys the only sound in the vast, silent building, a desperate symphony against impending chaos. Hours later, as dawn painted the DC sky in hues of orange and gray, the red alerts on Arthur's screen began to recede, replaced by reassuring green. The Meridian Nexus hummed back to life, its data streams flowing smoothly, its critical functions restored. The global trade order, unknowingly teetering on the brink, had been pulled back from the precipice by the quiet dedication of one man and a few hours of frantic work. Arthur leaned back in his chair, utterly exhausted but with a profound sense of relief. Marcus, who had stood watch the entire time, simply nodded. "Good work, Finch," he said, his voice a low rumble. Arthur offered a small, tired smile. The world would never know. Days later, the government shutdown finally ended. The lights flickered back on in the Department of Commerce, desks filled, and the familiar hum of bureaucracy resumed. Arthur Finch returned to his cubicle, his routine undisturbed. He logged into the Meridian Nexus, observing its steady, reliable pulse. No one mentioned the near catastrophe, no one lauded his quiet heroism. The global trade order continued its intricate dance, oblivious to the silent gear that had nearly ceased to turn. Arthur, the unseen cog, simply continued his work, ensuring the system remained stable, its silent hum a testament to a crisis averted and a world unknowingly saved.